Crypto, AI, Evangelion. There are many black boxes ordinary people, me included, like to talk about without really understanding the concept. But probably nothing is both used and misunderstood as widely as the mighty capitalism. Ask the average Joe about it, and you will learn that capitalism is something about private property, or corporations, or low wages, or stonks, or trade, or small government, and many other vibes that kinda match. It's okay to have a very vague understanding of most concepts in the world, but it's different with capitalism. Making it a scapegoat and a strawman has been historically a prerogative of regimes that were much more inhumane than everything they tried to collect under ultra-wide capitalism umbrella. And while the Cold War ended a long time ago, the anti-capitalist sentiment fueled by questionable movements is still very much alive. So in this video, I won't call you a mustache man for daring to criticize the I love money system, nor will I argue that the objectively best ideology of the world should be immune from scrutiny. Instead, let's try to learn whether capitalism even exists, and if it's no longer relevant, can we pick a better concept? You don't need to be a nerd to see that these and these are very alike and probably were produced by social systems with similar values and goals. But can you say the same about these? Some would, even despite being on different ends of a horseshoe. And the sad thing is that some of these namely Marxists, produced the most popular definitions of capitalism and promoted it via the science narrative to be almost unchallenged. Before modern economics arrived, that is. Even today, when most people say capitalism, and especially if they criticize it, they mean it in a Marxian way, a system defined by capital labor position and where economic interests define political ones. Hence the desire to attribute everything bad in industrial and later human history to all-encompassing capitalism, as if it was Hegelian absolute spirit. Or maybe it really was. After all, in Marxist theory, the bourgeois are the ruling class and every act of war, colonialism and exploitation must come from them. In reality, political and economic elites may intertwine, but if they do establish any sort of uneven relationship, it's often dominated by the bureaucracy/nobility or the military, not some ruthless oligarchs. And the whole premise of wars being a way to expand markets to fill some top hat pockets begins to fade when you consider that prestige and national grandeur was the dominant factors for, let's say, Scramble for Africa, where economic gains were concentrated in the select few horribly inhumane semi-slave colonies like Belgian Congo, while others were mostly in deep red. So why is the concept of capitalism so vague, while other big ideologies of modernity are so consolidated? The way they were born is the answer. There was no single mastermind behind the invention of capitalism. Smith comes close, but he described the situation he already lived in, not proposed it. While capitalism seems to have evolved without being designed by some great or pretentious intellectual, its main opponents, though. When we talk about the authors, when you say socialism, you mean Marx. When you say fascism, you mean Gentile. But capitalism simply doesn't have a godfather. While socialism and fascism are ideal systems conceptualized by social thinkers and designed specifically to address capitalism's problems. By making situations so much worse, people would remember capitalism as the best thing that ever existed. Something we call capitalism did almost naturally originate somewhere in modern England or the Netherlands. Compare that to proverbs and quotes. They both contain wisdom, presumably, but the authors of the latter are widely known, while no one can remember who was a genius who first stated that the road to success is always under construction. Well, just assume this is a common sense. So is capitalism just some strawman invented by its critics to be easily defeated? Well, if you define it their way, I would say yes, as the core problem with the critically constructed concept of capitalism is its desire to describe both the political and economic systems of a society, which might have been true in 19th or early 20th century, where all market economies were also elitist democracies with the wealthy or the nobles having the right to vote. And that was when you could legitimately have thought that those two are always together. But nowadays, you can have market and profit motive, coupled with very different types of elites and systems of control. The assortment is truly stunning. Failed states, authoritarian personalistic regimes, authoritarian one-party regimes, liberal democracies, illiberal democracies, that's basically just another type of authoritarianism, and even theocracies. All of them kinda respect this whole private ownership thing, especially if you are not large enough, and would have been classified as capitalist in the eyes of Marx or his followers. For example, the Soviets even considered fascism as the ultimate form of capitalism because the NSDAP was supported by the military-industrial magnate class, consisting of one person. All others joined in after the Nazis won and started to build up their control of the economy. Everyone is market-based now, but not capitalist in the original sense. And that's why its critique, even if valid, lost most of its sense. People still attribute all kinds of problems to capitalism while thinking about societies where markets define prices and distribution of goods but have no effect on political outcomes. Were Russian businessmen happy about the so-called special military operation? Would the Chinese ACOs appreciate their nation invading Taiwan with the risk to severe global trade? I doubt it. But they are not the political elites, so they have to obey even in once bourgeois democracies. Politics are not defined by some shady plots of bankers and industrialists, but with, yes, not hard to sway, yes, not very rational, yes, sometimes impulsive, but the ordinary people nonetheless. Just ask American companies. Are they happy with Trump tariffs? In short, capitalism was meant to describe both political and economic systems. It was not very successful in doing that even back when it was first conceived, and it's outright nonsensical today, when everyone is capitalist economy, but not politically. So, if this concept is suboptimal, can we pick a better one? First of all, let's try to understand why people like to generalize things so much, even if they try not to be biased. Oversimplifying the political-economic system to capitalism is a natural response to the modern world being too complicated to understand. So, if we are to offer a better concept for catching a capitalist vibe, or a classification representing facets of it, we must make it relatively straightforward. First of all, we should separate political and economic systems. You can have wannabe totalitarian communists with a large private sector, and functioning democracies with heavy state intervention in the economy. Next, we should differentiate between real and institutionally allowed degrees of pluralism existing in these systems. For example, Japan is a nation that permits many political actors legally, but due to political culture and inertia, one party dominates the landscape here. Put those two measures together, and congratulations, we made the political compass 2.0, electric boogaloo. But with a twist. We will slightly tilt the political axis, as the elites are far more okay with ceding control on the economic front compared to the political one. The most people on this earth still live in autocracies after all. Let's continue with our beloved Japan, which is a de jure pluralist, but de facto semi-pluralist nation. The same goes for the economy. Japan's ease of doing business ranking is respectable, and unlike her unexpected neighbor, you won't get nationalized for failing to uphold the values of a great leader. But ever since the export-led boom of the 1960s, the kyoreitsu, large conglomerates of financial and industrial assets merged together, remain undisputed masters of the kawaii economy. So we should place her somewhat in the middle on our modern national compass, which yet again proves Japan to be perfectly balanced. as all things should be. The flagships of liberal democracy, the United States, former British colonies and broader Europe, would be considered more pluralist in comparison, although the American and Westminster political systems strongly favor only two main parties, but this is compensated by economic dynamism, which is lower in the EU, but coupled with more political opportunities here. And China, with her one-party system, but relatively large private market, although heavily supervised by the government, would be somewhere middle-low on economic pluralism and certainly low on political one. And the low pluralist zone would be filled with Eritrea, North Korea, and other comparable hellholes. So rejoice, casual learners, now we have totally unbiased framework to refer to. Simple, yet not dumbed down, informative, yet not pretentious. It's time to go on your keyboard crusade, armed with the best of YouTube's wannabe social science innovations, and spread the truth of semi-shitposting all over the net. But seriously, if you like this shallow dive into the whole capitalism topic, like, subscribe, be kind to your friends and family, eat and sleep well, breathe regularly to avoid premature death, and thank you for watching.